However, once you're on the ground, if you listen, you realize that, well, these local people from the rural area, they're teaching you, and they have knowledge that is on par with the PhD level, right? So that, all of these puzzle pieces started coming together, and you realize we gotta include people, for so many reasons. And science needs to be inclusive, not really exclusive.
Hello everyone and welcome to Geekoscopy 101, the podcast that explores the intersection between science, story and play with me, your host Dr. Janus Kisten. And today we're exploring aquatic science, natural science and exploration for everyone with aquatic scientist and citizen science facilitator and entrepreneur, Dr. Nelson Miranda of Argonaut Science. Welcome to the show, Nelson. How are you doing?
I'm hot. Janus, Cape Town right now is the hottest place on the planet, or so they say. I saw a funny diagram. It was the sun and the planet Earth, and right about where Venus is supposed to be, they put Cape Town.
Cape Town specifically. Put you guys on one of Elon Musk's shuttles, and they sent you guys there.
They need the technology needs to advance, but maybe not so quick. Anyway, it feels really hot, and it feels like an unusual weather pattern. They say events that every 20 years have the likelihood of occurring, like massive waves. For a moment there, we thought, it felt a little bit like the end of days. I looked outside my window, and everything was just blank. There was a big. But doing well, survived so far.
Yeah. It's still early, like 2022. Let's hope it's not like 2020 part 2, because we can't handle that any longer.
True. But we're hopeful. We positive.
Indeed. Like with the weather, I think we're shifting from a like El Nino to a La Nina period. So like it's getting more wet and rainfall's increasing.
Yeah.
And I think
according to what we think.
Yeah.
According to.
But if you look outside, like in KZN, and like there's just people like flooded everywhere. And they also say it's like a super cycle, so it's like super rainy as well, like every other.
That's right. Years, everything seems to be intensifying. There are the theme of super is like a common theme, not only in the weather, it's a common theme now in everything. Everyone talks about superheroes, and I think Marvel has something to do with this, perhaps.
Yeah. They started the trend. Mother Nature was like, I need to get on this, and like. Yeah, for sure. Speaking about nature and science, tell us a bit about who you are, Nelson, and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a biologist. I'm a professional natural scientist, which means I do consulting for anyone and everyone, from industry to small businesses, individuals. I have small business that I'm part of, Argonaut Science. Let's see.
Got to get that branding.
Yeah, we're working on our branding, as you can see behind me as well. We do everything from, I'm actually, I really like the breath work and sort of water skills side of what we do, because we're all about making safe spaces for people. And, our slogan is because science and exploration belongs to everyone. So that's what we're trying to do here.
Agreed. For sure. And are you guys winning? Are you getting people involved?
It's a battle. Yeah, it's a battle. So I'm also what you'd probably consider a grassroots entrepreneur, meaning that I don't look for big funding. I look for solutions that work from the ground up. So it's not about us and how cool we are and what we do. It's about the community. It's about everyone. And so we look for needs. So that's our big challenge, to find what people need and to be able to offer something that is helpful. And of course, doing this as a business, not as a non-profit. So we are trying to encourage small businesses. We're trying to encourage individuals to sort of build themselves through entrepreneurship.
For sure, and you originally started out as an academic doing pure science. What inspired you to get into the field of biology, marine biology, aquatic science, and all of that?
Yeah, actually, it's a long story, right? Because I'm not originally a water person at all. You know, I was born in a very small rural village away from anything. I didn't learn. No one taught me how to swim. No one knew how to swim. That's probably why.
Oh dear.
Oh dear, yeah. But I always was interested in biology since I was young. You know, I would sort of venture out into the rural area, into nature. And I would like to watch and record things already. And then later on, when I immigrated to South Africa, we started moving towards the coastline. Eventually, I ended up in Durban, and then it was like, bam! You know, there's the ocean, and you know, you can't escape it. Even if you're inland, that humidity, as you know.
Yeah.
So water is everywhere, you know. Yeah, you know, water is everywhere, and as I did my schooling there, as I developed my interest and curiosity for biology, eventually, you know, I started looking at what am I going to do? Am I going to go to university? So I actually went and I met my mentor before I knew he was going to become my mentor. So I sort of like, you know, made a trip to University of KwaZulu-Natal, and I met the first professor that would talk to me. And he happened to be an oceanographer, right? So I think that really, you know, like it was a chance. It was like a chance. A lot of things about chance, but you know, it was a good thing because eventually, after I enrolled in university and when I started going into my postgraduate sort of studies. Then I ended up with him as a supervisor, and we did a project in the water with snails. And today I'm a malacologist, which you know, it's those strange people that work on snails, and particularly, you know, on the soft, squishy bits of the snails. And then, you know, as we looked into water, and we looked at the things that live in water, then you realize, wow, this is, if you have a curiosity for life, look into water. You won't see much when you first look at it because it's almost like the secrets are invisible in there, you know? But the longer you spend, the more you realize, wow, water really is everywhere. And then when I look back at where I started in the rural area, where I never thought about the ocean, I never seen the ocean. And now I realize, no, but the ocean was there with me this whole time.
For sure, that's pretty cool. At what point along your career did you realize that creating more accessibility of science to the general public was important and kind of lacking so far?
Right. Because obviously how do we offer, you know, an experience or a tour, or like, you know, how do we communicate as a business, you know, this connection with the natural spaces, you know, how do we do it? And how do I, because I'm still an academic, right? And it's hard to shake that off, all of those skills and things that you build up through your education. They're still part of you. But, you know, how do you then make those connections? That became very apparent to me as we started to do field work, and we started to realize that we can't isolate, you know, the biological, you know, project or the thing that we want to specialize in, because that's what we academics do, isn't it? We start specializing and isolating, so we become like, you know, really good at what we do, but also kind of disconnected. And then when we reconnect with people, and I'm not talking about, going out of my way in the middle of nowhere, just, people, just our neighbors even. And you realize, wow, it's so important for us to maintain that, connection, to be able to actually talk to each other. And then when you look at it, you realize that actually, what is a scientist? What is it? Is it someone who is curious about the world around them, about nature? Is it someone who uses some sort of, the scientific method, the so-called scientific method? Well, we all do it, right? The scientific method is common. It's a natural part of being a human being. And then you realize that human beings have a lot of value and a lot of knowledge. You realize that being inclusive is very important. Even though we all looking for our truths and we're all working in science towards some type of truth, the bigger truth involves all of us. And then I must say that when I was in rural areas again, and working with people there, then I realized, wow, okay, sure, I have a PhD, and I think I can teach, and I think I can share my knowledge and make a change. However, once you're on the ground, if you listen, you realize that, these local people from the rural area, they're teaching you, and they have knowledge that is on par with the PhD level, right? So that, all of these puzzle pieces started coming together, and you realize you gotta include people, for so many reasons. And science needs to be inclusive, not really exclusive, right?
How did you go about trying to include people? Like, how do you get them involved, and what do you facilitate there?
Well, it started with sort of research projects that I was working with sort of organizations and institutions, and we had to cooperate with social scientists, for example. So I would be sort of the ecologist, and now I need to sort of work together with a colleague that's a social scientist, and then when we try to understand each other, the process of trying to understand each other and incorporating our different approaches into one focused project, that started to open up the eyes. Okay, so this is how, we need to figure out how to, include people, how to integrate. We can't just separate the components and dissect things, So I'm a biologist, right? So once you dissect life, what happens to life? You kind of end it.
Yeah.
So that's not very useful, right? So we can't dissect too much. We need to sort of, and so we started to come with these multidisciplinary social ecological approaches to research. But then, that's still very isolated, because so you do the research project, and maybe you providing some information that might be useful to government, to local people, maybe not, How do you connect? So we need to bring people in. We need to actually work side by side with people. And what does that look like from a business perspective? Well, that looks like sort of a co-creation of something, So, for example, if you are an educator in the business, you have some guidelines, some idea, some structure of a curriculum. But the co-creation is when you focus more on the person that you want to work with, that you identified as your partner, right? And everyone's a partner. Everyone is a cooperation, We might not be talking to each other so much, but everyone is operating, and we're all operating, at the same time in different places, isn't it? So actually, when you look at it in the bigger picture, it is a cooperation. And now the trick is to make that into, an intent, something that is organized, and so that we can work together. And that means, from business perspective, that means citizen science, because citizen science is is open. Everyone is a citizen scientist. And citizen science allows you to come up with your own project. So it's not just a scientist that comes up with everything you slot in. Anyone, it's that power of ownership as well. Anyone can create and own their creation. In terms of observations, collecting information and data to actually, why are we doing this and what do I want to do? What does the community want and what for? Like, what is this project? How is this project really going to engage and benefit, people? And citizen science is basically the fundamental idea behind the business. And then you can work the business into that, the economics of things into that, slowly. And that's now figuring that out is the tricky bit, It's about affordability because you don't want to exclude people. So it has a lot, luckily I've got the multivariate, data analysis background. So we understand that there's so many of these variables at work, and we're trying to figure out what's important and what's important at that moment, at that place, for those local people, those so-called, we call them stakeholders, isn't it? This jargon, but it's just people, isn't it? At the end of the day, we're all people. We're trying to figure out how to work together. So that's different ways to do it in the academic realm and in the business realm. Being open to that really is the key.
Yeah, for sure. And it's definitely something that I think is increasing now. And things like, parachute scientists, where, these scientists from first world countries come like parachute in and take all the knowledge and like rocket off with all the knowledge and all the artifacts and all the things, and not leaving much back for the communities that they researched, had taken knowledge from. So that's why I really dig, you guys' initiatives that you try to get people and local people involved. And I've always been a proponent of, we are scientist friends. We worked in the same lab, and so I've always, as enjoying science and wanting to be a scientist for a long time, I've always enjoyed, the scientific thinking and like the very white lab coat, sterile view of things. But the other part of me is very like fantasy and like very like story like driven. And I enjoy the idea of like knowledge that is passed down just because of experience. The people have lived it, they've told the stories for generations, and their ancestors learned these stuff, passed down to them, and they just have this knowledge about the land that you can only know having had people there for a long time. And it's one of those things I think is kind of lost when it comes to academia, because it's difficult to quantify. It's something that just lives around people. Because we always want to like, okay, now we're going to test that, instead of, okay, let's listen first maybe and try and understand. It's one of those things where we do need to have a balance. And we definitely have to not take more than we give. We should be giving more than we take when it comes to doing science in a certain area, and the impact that we leave behind should be more positive than negative. So that's why I dig Argonaut Science.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that, and that's certainly the intent. But ironically, then everything that we do with our best intent and everything that we think is good and positive, because even scientists, we try to move away from bias, that whole value judgment of good or bad. We try to isolate ourselves and say, no, we're trying to be unbiased as possible. But actually, we should focus more maybe on stating our biases and realizing that we all have blind spots and realizing that even with all of our best intents, every good deed has a negative off-spin, just like some of the negative things have a positive off-spin. So because, it's always bigger than us, it's always bigger than... But we already making changes. This idea that we need to change the world, make things better, we need to go in there. be careful with that, because we already, just by being here, we already making changes.
For sure, yeah.
And like, we need to be ready to acknowledge that no matter how good we are as people, our actions, and no matter how good we thought they were or think they are, there's always some off-spin that might not be good. We may, for example, do a great job in an area, right? And be at the same time taking the agency away from someone from the area that could be doing that job, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not so simple that we should just give. That's not normally the answer, because there's privilege in the equation. We need to realize that those of us that are giving sometimes are giving from a place of privilege, and that can be actually very destructive for many reasons. We can write books about this stuff. There's a psychology of coming in, and being the savior, and what does a scientist look like, right? Do they look like a certain race or gender? These are serious issues that we have to be careful about. And even when we are with our best intent, when we volunteer, right? When we volunteer, we may actually be harming the ecology, the social, economic ecology of the area, whilst we are focusing on the environmental ecology of the area. Sure. You see, that happens. And if you are trying, for example, to build a local small business from the grassroots, like, for example, imagine you're in a rural area and you have all this indigenous knowledge, right? And people tell you, sometimes you need someone to say, wow, I have a PhD, but I'm looking at you and I'm talking to you as a person to a person on the same level, and I recognize you as a colleague, a PhD level colleague. This has literally happened to us many times, and we are literally busy writing papers, academic papers for those journals, those high-end journals, with the local people as co-authors, right? But the local people are like, they're like, wow, really? I mean, I'm just me, I'm a little old me. They're very humble and very down, like, they feel that they're not important, but actually they're very important. And imagine if they were trying to build a little business, from the grassroots. They can't compete with someone coming from outside, from the city or from another country, from a place of privilege, who just volunteers and does that job for them, isn't it? They can't compete with that. So sometimes when we are giving all our expertise for free, we're actually hurting the economy, and we're hurting, this sort of development, right? It's a complex thing, it's a complex thing.
It is. That's why, I like the idea of balance. It shouldn't never be like too much in one direction, I think. And the thing with that is you always have to be cognizant. You always have to be like paying attention to what the situation is, which is difficult. It takes a lot of energy, but I think it's going to be one of those things that we just have to put up with going forward.
Absolutely. And I mean, balance, even who decides what is the balance, and how do we measure the balance? These are very difficult things to actually...
Very difficult questions, What other kind of similar insights have you learned working with people in the field, moving away from academia into like private ventures? Like, what are the things that you learned that surprised you with that change?
Well, you have to make mistakes, and you have to own the mistakes. That's actually the basis of science. A lot of people think science is about knowing everything there is to know about something, and then some. But actually, an important part of science is making mistakes and owning those mistakes and saying, okay, and realizing things, because we have a lot of academic knowledge, which is ideas, and then in reality, what does that actually mean? Only when we actually try to apply and do we start to get that experience and that insight, and we actually live our theses and our ideas, and then there's so much that you learn just by transitioning to a different space from what you are used to, getting out of your comfort zone. You know, and I mean, that's something that I've always been fascinated about. I'm also, I study fear, and I study, comfort and discomfort. And you recall that we used to study the subject of systema, which is very. So I'm also a systema practitioner. I believe it's one of the most pure and, well, maybe not pure, but like very direct way of exploring what it is to be human. Anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent, but but as you move to these different spaces, for example, if you go into the professional realm, away from the relative shelter of the, well, maybe it's a very, very high shelter of the academia, the big institutions, then you kind of have to figure things out, a lot of things out about yourself, and then you start to realize maybe it's not about you. maybe it's about the client, the customer, the others, maybe the community. Maybe it's about what they're going through, what they need, the problems that people have and how to solve them, right? And then you start, and you see now it becomes a mindset of business rather than just academic sort of exploration. And so that curiosity that sort of is behind a lot of our endeavors, that can be applied, all those skills, all of that, those sort of those tendencies that you maybe develop in a different field, they may actually be very helpful for you, but you also kind of have to move away from your comfort zone at the same time, right? You have to kind of let things go and maybe start from scratch and look back and say, well, what I've done, it doesn't matter right now there's a problem on the ground, there's a client that needs this, and how am I going to address that, so trying to move away from the busyness of using your mind to solve problems theoretically all the time, and into being more practical and into being sort of open, because you think you're very well trained, but actually it doesn't count for much once you knock into reality. Once you have a real life problem and you have to really figure things out and cooperate. I think that the more you challenge yourself, the more you face your fear, the more you move away from that comfort, and you say, okay, well, here I am, I'm humbled, and how can I help? Let's listen and let's see what the problems are, and let's actually work together slowly to try to figure them out. That as part of the sort of insight that I would say, started dawning, making a lot of mistakes, trying things and failing. We are used to failing as scientists. We do things and it fails, and we do it again, it fails, and we're collecting information. So in the end, it's a good thing. But what does that actually mean when you go and you have, to solve a real problem for a client, someone who's been dealing with a trauma or a fear, or someone who needs to know what's happening around them. Why is it that it might be a bad idea to build something here, or what are we losing when we are developing? What is this development that we're trying to do when we are trying to improve the world around us? And what are we losing, from a natural perspective? And how can we sort of integrate, the benefits to people and services that come from being in a natural environment with, our day-to-day, money and, going out to the shops and having shelter and, where does it all fit in, It's still trying to figure that out. Still trying to figure that out. So realizing that you can't figure things out, and it can be a little bit overwhelming, but it's good for you.
Definitely. Given your new experience working with non-academics, but still in a science kind of field, what are your thoughts about changing the attitude of people who have this idea that like scientists may be this other species, like sitting on top of their high tower, like kind of spouting down things that you should or should not do, kind of trying to ruin your life or whatever in some way? Like, what thoughts do you have about that?
Because there is in the recent culture, or even not so recent culture, there's always distrust, of the people that are scientists. But we have to realize that we are people first, right? And I think, there's so many perspectives that we can look at it from. The scientists themselves, also we need to realize that we have roles to play, and we need to be careful not to overstep our roles and say, okay, well, I'm educated and I know this and that, so I'm going to tell you how things are supposed to happen. It's actually not a great way of having a conversation, and it creates more barriers. So there's almost this barrier that exists, this idea that separates people, and we need to question whether that's a good thing, and how are we going to solve that? Well, is it better for us to be divided, or is it better for us to cooperate in some way? Well, I think, we need to cooperate in some way. We don't have to like each other. We don't have to agree with each other, we don't have to be right all the time, because every right has a wrong. We just spoke about that earlier. Every good has the bad as well. And we need to be, sort of honest with ourselves. We need to be honest with ourselves and say, as scientists, maybe we need to say, this is my role and this is my opinion. Yes, it is an opinion. Maybe the ego is a little bit hurt when you say, thanks for your opinion, scientist. After they spent 30 years on a subject, but it is an opinion, it is an opinion, and that levels the playing field a little bit, because the ego sometimes really is very destructive. It gets in the way. And what are we trying to do? We're actually trying to create that trust between people, and for that we need to be on the same level. We can't. This idea of people being above each other and the hierarchy is not very helpful. And, generally speaking, scientists are supposedly neutral, isn't it? Because we have our biases, and we try to... And that's a very difficult role to play, so you... Because there are scientists that, you can be bought, and there are scientists that cannot be bought, everyone has an agenda, and, so this undermines our trust that we have with each other, isn't it? And I think it's so important to recognize each other as people with, valuable insights and opinions, and, we'll be a little bit more open and less defensive with each other, because I think together we definitely are a bit stronger. And it's not the kind of thing where we all can get along and like each other. It's more about, can we work together, This idea of separating people like that, not very useful. Therefore, maybe the scientists can, sort of come down a little bit to the level where the people are, and the people that are feeling below the scientists can come up a little bit and realize we're all on the same level, actually, and that's the space where we can actually, try to have an honest trust building exercise.
For sure, definitely. If you had like infinite resources, let's say time, money, manpower, what kind of citizen projects would you want to be part of or want to run? Like, what's your pie in the sky thing that you would do?
That is, I know it's important to be sort of, have this vision of, and be very, what's the word, ambitious about things. And there's nothing wrong with that. But actually, the reality is we don't have, the infinite
I know
resources.
we don't have that, Nelson. This is
No,
a fun
no.
question, not a realistic question.
Okay, fine. I'll play.
I'm trying to pick up the energy here, Nelson. Come on.
I think that if we already have almost like infinite resources in many ways, and if we could like bring them together, the kind of project is kind of like integrative project. So like small little projects with the people, each person in their locality, they're in charge of their project. They are watching the environment. They are collecting. This continuous monitoring. I think I'm passionate about continuous monitoring, and I'm not talking about the Big Brother. I'm not talking about that. No.
I'm talking about 1949 here.
No, and it's not that. It's a different concept altogether. We're talking about looking around and gathering information that is open to, this is why we need so many resources, because we need to coordinate and share all of this information, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
And coordinate with people, so that a highly trained scientist team could then link up seamlessly and coordinate with the local indigenous knowledge, group of people in an area. And the kids, the kids are part of this program, and also, because, for example, with citizen science, kids can make a huge difference. They come up with amazing ideas, And, for example, with the BioBlitz, BioBlitz is when you go out and you try to collect as much information as possible about the different kinds of life that exists in a place. If you send out kids to do that job, they can do a better job than the scientists, right? But if you coordinate with the scientists, you can actually come up with this amazing, set of information, but then also stories, the stories come out, and it's an opportunity for the elders to come and talk about, the story of the place, and then the social scientists have a lot to say as well, and to create some sort of integrative system, that's truly open and that really speaks to the needs of people. That would be amazing to do with all infinite resources, and that means that you really would realize that the world around you is wow, and then you realize your resources have to be infinite, because the world around you is infinite. And that's wow, that's a pie in the sky and a half. That's
definitely. Although it sounds so basic. It's cooperation and being able to create links between things is probably what gave mankind its power to be able to, change our environment and make our lives better throughout history. But we've kind of strayed away from that as populations got bigger. It became less of an integrated thing.
Yeah, we almost need that. Yeah, we need that. We need a dedicated, multidisciplinary, integrative system. Every project should have someone that comes in and say, "Hey, do you know this guy and that guy and that guy?" We're kind of doing that already more and more, and that's wonderful. If you see here, Rise from the Cape Flats, Shamir, hello, brother. I have to do a shout out. These are the kind of people that are just open. They work with everyone, they share, and they say, "Oh, do you know about this guy?" And that's really a lot of good comes out of that. Do you see?
Definitely. We need that networking, I think, on multiple levels, just not in our own little fields and echo chambers. I think
every effort, it's not to say that the current efforts are not good enough, or you could argue that, of course, but that's not the point. The point is that why do they stop? We put a lot of effort into something and then it kind of stops and we say, okay, we're done. we did an impact assessment, and now we're done. And now, thank you. Pay me, thank you. I mean, that's fair because I used my time. You got your thing, and then we're done. We're not done, right? There's so much opportunity, even doing like certain existing projects, where there could have been an opportunity for us to gather more information, really understand more, and include more, right? And we miss all of these opportunities simply because we're not coordinating in any way.
Yeah. It's kind of one of the failures of like living in a democratic world with like political cycles and like funding cycles, is that some things only like happen within that cycle, and then the next cycle is just gets scrapped. Yeah.
Why are we limited by that? So if you give me unlimited resources, what we want, it's not about changing that. It's to add on to that, so that those limitations become irrelevant.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's one of those weird things that just permeated throughout modern culture. But looking forward, Nelson, I always ask my guests this at the start of the year. What are you looking forward to in 2022?
2022. That balance that we spoke about, that's so important. Because, we are people. So we need to find that balance in our personal well-being, our personal relationships. It's so important, mental health is an important issue. We all are a lot more aware of it in the current COVID era. So it's so important to, as much as we want to do a lot and give a lot of ourselves, we have to find that balance that only we know in our lives. I'm working on that. I think in 2022 we can look for that. We can work on those personal relationships that maybe have deteriorated. There's a lot of people that need support, and I'm excited about looking at ways to be part of that support, to receive it as well, because we all need help. We're not, as much as we're here to help others, we also need help ourselves. We need to acknowledge that. And in 2022, I'm excited about working with you, with the Geekoscopy,
It might take you a while to get used to the name.
Geekoscopy.
There you go. You got it. Second try.
I got it. Geekoscopy. It's just my accent. My apologies.
Yeah. For sure.
And
it's always there. You've been in South Africa for so long, but you've always had that accent. It's actually cool. It makes you very unique.
It's my own thing, isn't it? But it has changed. I think it has changed.
Probably just haven't noticed because we've been together for a while.
Yeah, we have. I think now that I'm in Cape Town, now and again my accent gets a little bit more Cape Townish.
Maybe, perhaps, yeah.
Now and again.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so we are looking to forward to piloting a new show that Nelson and I are working on. It's going to be looking at some of the stuff that we do for our day jobs, but trying to make it a bit more fun for people to be able to digest. So a little bit of a project. We're going to trial and error and see how it goes. How are you feeling about it now?
Yeah, I think let's do it. Why not? And it's it's an exciting time now because the marine science curriculum as a school subject has been launched in South Africa. And I think, this is a great timing to, connect with people and, bring something to the table as well. And I think, trying a podcast. This is my first podcast. Did you know that?
Is it?
It's my first podcast.
Even
it is.
Being a guest on, really? Jeez.
It is, yeah, for sure. Yeah. So this is very cool for me, and we're looking forward to those projects, and definitely looking at more. What do people actually need? That's such an important thing to focus on this year. What do we actually need?
I agree.
And it's going to be entertaining because we everything we do needs to be entertaining,
Has to. We have to enjoy it and people have to enjoy it. Those are the number one priorities.
Yeah.
Everything else is next.
And that's like that's why storytelling is so cool. You it's entertaining, and then sneaky, you actually learn about yourself as you are sort of telling your story, and then you might realize that actually your story and everyone's story, it's all one story. So that's something to look forward to in 2022.
Yeah. Speaking about what people need, if anyone needs to get a hold of your work on the internet, where they can find you.
Yeah, so we are not astronaut. A lot of people say, is it astronaut? Astronaut science? No.
Oh, geez, really?
You see, but as astronauts go out of the planet Earth, whereas we actually dive into, the microcosm. Yeah. They're going to the big cosmos, we're going to the microcosm. So, that's why Geekoscopy is so relevant as well, isn't it? Because there's a microscope.
For sure. There's a microscope,
So here we are, the shameless advertisement. See, Argonaut Science. So if you type that into your friendly internets, Argonaut. See, this is the Argonaut, or the paper nautilus. It's an octopus, right? A little octopus that has this amazing shell. So normally octopus don't have the shell, but this one does. This one's special. And the shell, yeah, that's right. And then this one's got a shell on the outside. Beautiful thing. And see, the octopus has got five little individual arms. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. Ooh, did we make a mistake with our logo? No, we did not make a mistake with our logo. The other two arms have to hold that shell, right? They're holding the shell like a cat. Fascinating creature. Yeah, it's actually holding it in place. So that's our little mascot, and we are Argonaut Science. So we are on Instagram. We are trying to be cool on Instagram. We need help.
You're trying to be cool on Instagram. Jeez, Nelson. Your Instagram's old now, hey?
Yeah, I'm feeling very old. I'm feeling very old, actually.
I mean, we are old. It's sad.
So yeah, we need to talk to the kids. We need to get more kids involved. We love to work with kids in the field and in our business, and just get that excitement and that energy. That's what really empowers us. When we're working with kids, we never feel drained or afterwards. At the end of the day, yes. But when we're there, that energy, it's a blessing and it's wonderful. And we really like to work with kids. Some of the kids, these are my cousins, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Not cousins, my nephews. I'm the uncle now because I'm old.
Yeah.
These are the
That's how they refer to you, right?
So, yeah,
Uncle Nelson.
Yeah, Uncle Nelson, the snail. Show us another snail. Tell us a snail joke.
Oh, really?
So that sometimes happens.
Jeez, next time I have you on, I'm expecting a snail joke.
Snail jokes. Yeah, it's part of the business. You have to know a few.
To know a few snail jokes. Well, thank you so much for joining, Nelson. It's been a fun chat and good catching up. And we'll see you next time.
Good to see you. And we'll see you guys again in the next podcast, which we don't have a name for. No. So we need to figure that out.
That's step one, figure out the name. But anyway, thanks for listening and cheers.